Hey everybody, I'm Joe Killinger. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur, and we put these videos together every week to give you all the tips and insights from my experience over the last several years. So make sure you tune in and subscribe, and thank you. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. It's almost Christmas here in Southern California. It's a whopping 75 degrees maybe, so it's really hard to get in the mood, so I put my tie on today. Can you see that?
It's a nice tie.
Thank you. Sarcasm. I was watching CNBC this morning. Alex Rodriguez and Barry Sternlicht were on and talking about the reason they moved some of their companies to Miami, maybe South Beach, but I'm not sure where they're at, but they're in Florida. And so, actually, Barry moved down there quite a while ago, and they're doing some development. But they got me thinking about, they're telling the reasons they're moving into these areas. Well, I want to talk today about the areas that a lot of these companies are moving from, and what you should be looking for in investing in those areas. So, if you like what we have to say today, please give us a subscribe, and do smash that like button at the end as well. All right. So, a lot of people are leaving some of these states.
Yes.
You've got, I know that New York and California are taking kind of a big hit. I know these just in last week, it was Oracle, Hewlett-Packard, Levi's is leasing out a bunch of space, right?
Third of their space, over
a third of it?
100,000 square feet.
Yep, Tesla. There was another one too, and Manhattan had a couple of big private equity firms saying that if you want to live somewhere else, we will open an office there. And so they're chasing the talent is what they were doing. So I see that as probably an issue that a lot of companies are going to have, because like Silicon Valley had all the tech people there. Now Austin, Dallas have a lot of that.
Absolutely.
And so what I want to do today is touch on for newer investors what they should be looking at and investing in areas that people are moving out of. What should they be looking for? And so I really think that, a lot of it, if you have an office, you have a tech company, and we'll talk mostly about Southern California or Northern California, because that's what we know being here in California. But, having the kind of stronghold on the tech talent in California over the last several years, those people are moving out. If I want to invest in an office or retail or multifamily in an area that a lot of these people moved out in, what should I be looking for?
Well, a couple things. If it's office, because that's going to take probably some of the biggest hits the quickest.
Yeah.
And when we start talking about that, you want to look to see how you can backfill it.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is a lot of these companies that you just mentioned that are moving out have invested quite a bit of tenant improvements into their current office space.
A lot of offices are beautiful.
So, not just beautiful, but extremely efficient. Where they may have raised platforms for their floors, which allows for different ways you can manipulate the way the seating arrangements are, especially in nowadays when you're looking at COVID related issues of spacing.
Space.
And so they put in a lot of this money. So what might be a good idea also is to backfill, but also seeing what the industry itself has done. Meaning, we talk about the Silicon Valley, but they've lost a lot of talent a few years ago to Silicon Beach in Los Angeles.
Yep.
So you saw a lot of changes there, but that didn't hurt them or impact them as much as a lot of people thought it was going to be, because they were able to restructure, position themselves, for lack of a better word, but more into attracting companies that may not be the Levi Strauss of the world or the Teslas, but the very next level, the secondary markets coming in. And
but those aren't going to
some of their competitors even.
Right, but those aren't going to be able to pay the same rents, though. So you've really got to take a look at, if you have a tech company moving out, they're probably not going to, you're not going to backfill it with somebody that's paying that same rent.
No. So you want to make sure that when you do your underwriting that, it's all about the rent, land value, cost of construction, whether or not it actually makes sense.
Right.
You know, meaning, are there barriers to entry that's going to make this property that you just acquired a lot more attractive down the road or in a few years? And when we start talking about this on the investment side, a lot of investors don't do the long-term planning.
Right.
You know, they'll look at short-term, and for me, short-term is 5 years or less.
Yeah.
Long
As a new investor, looking at short-term in an area that has declining population,
Yeah.
salaries might be adjusting, that can be a tough road to hoe. So,
Yeah.
you know, you really got to consider that. Now, what about other uses? I mean, I heard in Manhattan that they're taking some of the larger office buildings and adding apartments.
Apartments.
Which I also understand that there were over 16,000 apartments available already that were being leased
Yeah.
out. Now you're adding more inventory to that, so you're going to be driving prices down. So really be taking a look at that. I mean, it's when it comes to the apartments, you want to be looking at, you know, what concessions are they giving right now before you acquire? What concessions have they reduced rents? You got to look at the population. What population is coming in? You're going to want to talk to your Chamber of Commerce. You're going to want to talk to your city council. You know, the multifamily is, you know, there have already been, what's been the decline across the country in lease rates?
Oh, lease rates. Well,
Rental rates in apartments did.
rental rates in apartments overall, and across the country, we don't track that as much, but I know
Okay.
like specifically Southern California,
Okay.
we're seeing 10% plus 10, 12% rental
Okay.
rate reduction just in the last 6 months.
Well, in Southern California hasn't been losing the companies like
No,
Northern California.
It hasn't.
So,
It hasn't. So one thing that people don't
and Manhattan.
yeah, absolutely. And one thing a lot of investors don't take into account is that they don't look at the domino effect.
Right.
So, you know, if you have a lot of companies that are moving out and they're being replaced by other companies that perhaps are not paying as well, it's going to affect the apartment market. It's going to
Sure.
affect the housing market. It's going to affect retail because there's less money to spend. So they're going to want to really take a look at what we can do to backfill, how we can do it, but also more importantly, how quickly we can recoup. You know, California, I think, is going to be a little bit more difficult converting some of it to apartments,
Probably,
code
yeah.
violations
Yeah,
or
yeah.
code issues, things like that. But when we start looking at that, we also want to look at, well, what makes this property unique? What are the traffic generators? What are the barriers to entry? What is going to attract one company over another, and then use that? But when you're underwriting, you can't underwrite it, I think, well, today you can't underwrite it at today's values. You're going to have to underwrite it for a declining value marketplace, what the expectations are, and where we are. And the nice part is, these markets that you talk about, the reason why they're major metros is a lot of people around the world want to live here. So even though there's a lot of companies right now that are getting the news from moving out of those areas, there's still a lot of people moving in. They're just not making as much yet.
Well, that's what I think is, you know, going back to Manhattan and converting this office, and they're going to be flooding the market. Well, I don't know how many they're converting, so I shouldn't say flooding the market, but, well, 16,000 available apartments, pretty flooded in such a small area. But, you know, it's going to allow, you're going to have to adjust your rents. There will be a decrease in values in properties. So, you know, you really got to take a look at that before you go acquiring it. How low do you think rental rates will be going? What kind of, and this is office, retail, and apartments, what kind of concessions are you going to have to give to get somebody back in there? And you don't want to get caught chasing that market down, because you've got the only way to get through it is long-term hold. And so, which may be exactly what you want. If you're a long-term holder, you've got the ability to do it, great, because I think you're going to see there'll be other Silicon Valley, San Francisco, beautiful cities. There'll be other people that want to come in, just at what lease rates.
Absolutely.
So you really got to take a look at that.
And you're going to want to use strategies that are going to protect you for the long term as well, meaning take into account what's happening in the area, what other municipalities may be in control. Like, for instance, California has a statewide rent control, and some of the cities, specifically San Francisco and Los Angeles that we talked about, also have city rent control, which is even more restrictive than the statewide. So, you know, if you're, instead of lowering rental rates for current tenants, give them a concession. to get you through the downtime of a year, maybe 2 years. So this way, it's effective to them of lowering the rental rates, but you're still at a higher booked rate, so that when it's time for raising rents, and now that you're back in an up market, you're not playing catch up because of rent control.
Right.
So definitely use some of those strategies that you can do to protect your long-term income, and by offering concessions versus
And build out.
reductions.
Build
And
out.
build out.
Build out is
Absolutely.
a strong, you can make, if you've got kind of a tired building, freshen it up for a great tenant, really go for the
Yeah.
long term. And make sure you're talking to the public officials. I can tell you that the people running the cities that people are moving from right now are all day, every day, looking for people to fill in. They're reaching out to other companies, hey, come to Manhattan, come to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. They're reaching out to all of them, trying to get other people in. So there will be people coming back into those communities. But again, what's the price? At what rate? What are those salaries going to be? That's what you have to find out and look for with your due diligence. So just be careful. Due diligence, and buy for location. That's one thing. If you have the best location, it's going to come back the fastest.
Absolutely, and that's what I love about some of these major metros is that it typically is the last one to go down,
First to come
and
in.
first to come back up. And something that you brought up just
If
now,
they bring in the jobs. If
if they bring in the jobs, and they typically tend to. One thing that you do want to take into consideration, though, also is that if you are looking at secondary markets to invest in, you want to make sure that you still keep the real estate fundamentals in place. I think that, excuse me, I think that in any market, you can find a really good location or property, but you don't want to settle, and you should never have to settle.
Right.
So, really take a look at what's happening in that market, what's going on, what's driving the factors on a macroeconomic scale, and then you can then concentrate on the micro.
Right. Let's talk about, we have a friend that's out there trying to buy properties right now, and he's been trying to buy multifamily all around Texas. Well, not all around, mostly focused around Austin and San Antonio. And he keeps writing offers and keeps getting beat out. So there's a ton of people there. Is there these tertiary markets is what I'm getting at. Should you be looking at going, I don't know any really smaller cities outside of Austin and San Antonio, but
Lockhart.
No,
It's barbecue capital of the world. That's why one reason I know.
So you want to live in Lockhart because you're close to the barbecue. You got to be careful going into these tertiary markets
Absolutely.
because if you're going to bring a company in there, and Austin it's getting pretty crowded there, right? So you want to be north or just the outer lying area. You got to think about job pool. Who are you going to be able to hire? Are you going to be able to have people if you have a company, if you have a retail space? Who are you going to be shopping? You have apartments. Is there enough people in the area? So, what are your thoughts on investing in these tertiary markets?
Again, I think that some of the markets can be really good. Others can be very scary, and so you want to look at historical, what's going on for that area historically, future growth, what's driving it, what's driving the interest. The last thing you want to do is, taking your tips. I think during the last real estate run, was it Sam Zell that said I knew to get out of it because my waiter started giving me real estate tips.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is start chasing everybody and following, the trends. And this may be why he's getting beaten out a lot, because a lot of people are going out there and it's driving the prices so high that you don't want to be the one buying at the highest price. What you want to do is really take a look at, here's the market, here's what's driving it, here are the fundamentals for that real estate, and here's why I should invest.
Yeah.
Not because everyone else is investing in there, but is it next to a high school? Does it have high traffic counts? Is it a growing income and population so that there'll be increased demand for multifamily, and therefore you'll be able to raise rents quicker.
Well, and also how much development is already coming into that.
Absolutely, and land
If it's going to be if it's going to be overbuilt
Yeah.
in a few years,
Absolutely.
you want to be.
If your average price for land is a couple dollars a square foot, you got to realize someone can build something brand spanking new next to you and charge less rent and still make more money.
Yeah, that's always,
So-
we saw that around Texas before, a brand new building
Absolutely.
going up. And
Absolutely.
right next to a dilapidated one. or a tired one. Yeah, it's tertiary markets I think you really have to be careful with. You really need to do your due diligence there too, because if people are moving into these smaller towns, they still want to have a lot of the restaurants and the shopping that they can go to. So, so there is opportunity there. We don't want to scare you away from it, but just, again, really do your due diligence. So, but, as a first-time investor, what it comes down to is really looking at the numbers. And you've got to be looking at least 5 years out right now. You've got to be taking a look at, what's going to be happening in this community. Be talking to the Chamber of Commerce. Be talking to all the council members in the area. Make sure you're talking to them. See what's on track to come into this city. So it's just never stop doing your due diligence. Be checking up with them constantly. So I don't know that we missed anything. Did we kind of touch on everything?
I think we touched on pretty much everything other than what I always like to say. If you need help and assistance looking for some good investment properties, make sure you find a good broker.
Yeah.
So
it is important. Make sure you get somebody that actually cares about you. They're not just doing deals, and they're not just interested in making money, because there's a lot of activity in the marketplace right now. So, all right. Well, thank you for tuning in, George. Thank you for coming in today and giving us all your information. And again, if you haven't done so, please do subscribe and make sure you smash that like button for us today. Thank you.